Welcome on this sunny Tuesday. In the UK, we've got non-UK attendance here, so I'm not going to make weather-based judgments globally here. But welcome to the third in our series of Aging Well, Changing the Conversation webinars. We've had 2 webinars so far and 2 podcasts. So if you've missed any of them, please do go and watch those back, listen to them back on the Possibility Club, the details of which we will pop into the chat. The Aging Well project, which is all a part of, brings together a host of activities, research and content. And as a part of this, we set up the community content via the Possibility Club. And the purpose of these sessions is really to change the conversation we're having about aging, look at it from lots of different perspectives, and actually ensure we are having the conversation. One key theme that's come through these sessions from the beginning is it's something that happens to us all, but there's a reluctance to actually be proactive, to talk about it, to age well. And what does that mean? And whether aging is a problem, in inverted commas, which seems horrific. So about today, can disruptive innovation help people to age better? So about this event, people who provide services for older people are faced with more challenges than ever before, from the types of services older people need to the way they're accessed and by who. With public and private systems running alongside one another, how can we ensure equality of access? So today, we're going to be exploring the changing landscape of care provision and how businesses and care providers are adapting. We will look at the challenges this presents to commissioners regarding what is needed to support older people to get the service that work best for them. And the way that this session is going to work is we've got 4 wonderful panelists. I am merely here to facilitate. My name is Lucy Payne, I'm a member of the Always Possible team, and we will be speaking to Dr. Rali Hiteva, Suzanne Noble, Dr. Kahlaid Ali, and Lucy Buck. We'll go around and listen to them, and then we're going to go back into a Q&A. So what I'd really love for you to do is get involved, as I say, having a chat with us, and we want to spark some controversy in this. Let's challenge each other. This project is funded by the University of Sussex and the Economic and the Social Research Council to help translate academic knowledge into action. And the activity is facilitated by Always Possible, a unique consultancy looking at 21st century problem solving through connected conversation. And that's me. And people are saying hello in the chat as well. Do say hi. Hi, Jane. Thank you for being the first out there. Do keep it conversations. What I'll do now, that's the positioning of this. Let's now get stuck in. I'd like to introduce our first panelist. That's Dr. Rali. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Give me a second just to share my screen. And while I'm doing that, I want to say that I'm a research fellow at the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex, and I'm also an engagement lead for SPRU. Surprisingly, the majority of my career has been spent thinking, talking about, and researching infrastructure. And I think that is very relevant for discussion on the meaning of healthy aging. And particularly, I want to talk to you today about what are the linkages around digital inclusion, achieving net zero, and healthy aging. Right. So in terms of what COVID has done, what the global pandemic has done to everyone is that it has really speed up processes of digitalization in absolutely every aspect of life. So that forced a great deal of people towards digital forms of communication and also digital forms of conducting their just everyday life. By that, I mean, is, for example, a lot of utilities and companies that previously offered options to for people to go and see someone, or for someone to go into a call center rather than just use an app. They have stopped providing those services. And we know that with restrictions on travel, it's quite possible that this will have a longer term impact. That is highly unlikely at this point in time that everyone who used to work in an office is going to go back to doing that. So what does that basically mean is not only people were forced into relying more heavily on digital devices, but it's what we're seeing is also proliferation of digital bundles. So, for example, some of the best deals for buying a new boiler come with a free Alexa or a free hub, which is a smart hub, and it's controlled and interfaced through digital technology. So it's quite likely that there is a proliferation of digital bundles coming into your life, even if you didn't want them to. Also, there are a lot of services right now are being offered as digital by default. So what does that mean? In practical terms, if we think about the implication of this, is not only questions about to what extent people are equally able to use these digital interfaces and technologies in order to create and capture value for themselves and use the services that they need, but also, quite interestingly, it means that you just have more devices in your home. When you have more devices in your home, that leads to big changes in terms of energy demand. So this is particularly pertinent for cases where we do know that elderly people are usually more dependent on a constant use of energy supply, have higher kind of needs for heat comfort, and it's quite likely that they might also be more likely to find themselves in a situation of fuel vulnerability or poverty. So what I'm trying to do is create a research agenda where we can actually ask a question: how do these different trends come together? So particularly, I'm interested in how does digital exclusion affect the ability of vulnerable people and elderly people to kind of, those that are generally in the periphery of energy transition, to benefit from the energy transformation or the transition to net zero. So when we talk about net zero, we are referring to something quite specific, and it's quite ambitious agenda. It's inscribed in law in the UK, and it means that by 2050, the whole of the UK will have to go net zero. So actually, there are no problems with that per se, but achieving net zero is a highly localized and contextually specific thing. So individual local authorities and regions have also sought to impose their own targets for net zero. For example, in Brighton and Hove, where the University of Sussex is based, the local council decided that by declaring a climate emergency, we're going to achieve net zero by 2035. But also there are other reasons why achieving net zero is highly contextually specific. It's really dependent not only on the profile of existing infrastructure, by that I mean how high is the concentration of badly insulated buildings, what kind of retrofit needs to be carried out in order to make sure that the housing stock is suitable for the introduction of some of the low carbon technologies, which are going to help us achieve net zero. Particularly, I'm talking about electric vehicles, I'm talking about heat pumps, smart meters, and smart responsive technology. It also means that there are areas, particularly in Sussex, with high concentration of aging population in the later stages. So places like Bexhill, Eastbourne, and even Hastings. They will have a high concentration of people, not only over a certain age, but also they're likely to have a high concentration of the type of built environment which does not fit very nicely with the strategies, incentives, and plans which have been developed. So the assumption for developing strategy and incentives for decarbonizing homes, of course, has been developed around the idea that people own their own properties and they can make freely decisions about what kind of energy supply they have and what kind of low carbon technology, such as solar panels, they can put on their rooftops. But in these places that I mentioned, there is a high concentration of shelter schemes. So this is a different type of housing which is specifically developed for elderly people, where they actually sometimes don't have access to the internet. They wouldn't be able to make any choices with regards to who their energy supplier is, and they wouldn't be able to use any kind of heat pumps, electric vehicles, or low carbon technologies if they wish so. So in very simple terms, they are really falling outside of the kind of ways in which the government and local authorities look to support people in vulnerable positions to transition towards net zero. And this is really problematic because if you are not able to participate in what kind of technical and not technical solutions are being chosen in order to achieve net zero in your specific area, it is highly unlikely that you'll actually be able to benefit from them. And in those terms, I mean, going digital by default builds on the assumption that energy companies will be able to collect data from everyone in the population, according to which they can provide suitable services and products. If you don't have a smart meter and you don't produce a lot of digital data, just because you listen to the radio and have a landline, how are you going to produce this data? You wouldn't. If you're not captured in that data, it's quite unlikely that they will be aware of what your needs are or what your energy profile is. And the other thing is, if we don't involve and engage the elderly population about what kind of future they imagine with respect to net zero, it's quite likely we're going to also leave certain types of vulnerabilities completely outside of the scopes of things that we're looking at in order to make sure that no one's left behind. And one of the most simple and straightforward examples of that is, just as with the example of heat, elderly people, has been proven, they are actually disproportionately more impacted by climate change. So higher temperatures in the summer equally will have a disproportionately negative effect on the older population. So I'm going to stop here, but hopefully I outline an agenda which I think it's really important to be unpacked further and be taken forward, because at this point we really cannot afford to move towards any kind of solutions and pathways of achieving net zero as regions, as cities, as town, and as a society, without actually making sure that it works and create and captures value for elderly people. And obviously that will put, the way I see it is this will lay the foundations for thinking about what are the connections between healthy aging, achieving net zero, which is an environmental and energy impact more than anything else, and digital inclusion.
Thank you. It's interesting. I mean, how do we start having those conversations? Because it feels like you've got an invisible population who aren't being involved in the conversation, but are going to be hugely impacted by it. Have you seen anybody who is actually addressing it? Whether it's going around talking to people door by door or?
Well, the majority of organizations that are currently working on developing strategies and plans, particularly within regions around net zero, are actually what I would call a traditional energy actors, such as distribution network operators. So distribution network operators don't have any kind of direct interface with customers, in particularly vulnerable customers. So they're designing technical solutions with which we will achieve net zero. And quite often in what they do, there is an assumption that there is this homogeneous group of vulnerable people. There isn't. Different types of vulnerability come with different characteristics, different requirements, and so on. The interesting thing about this is that we have found out that responses to net zero, or how people imagine their role is going to be in helping decarbonize their town, their community, they're strongly gendered, and it seems that there is a big difference between ages. Younger people are less inclined to be willing to spend more money on their energy bills, on technology that they're not going to see directly the benefits of. What we did find out is actually people over the age of 55 have the opposite inclination. They are more open to pay more for energy if that means that it will create benefits for future generations that they won't be able to experience directly. These kind of things need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But you're right, traditional energy suppliers are doing all they can to not talk to us. You're right, aren't they? It's everything is have the chat up online. We don't want to engage. So how we get maybe local ambassadors within communities, because I think maybe a few people feel disengaged from net zero as a concept, not the actual what it means, but how does that person who has no technologies get engaged and be a part of it? It doesn't sound like there's a solution yet. Go on, Kahlaid, go on.
Thanks, Rali. This was very thought-provoking and an important subject. I can see concentrations or groups of older people, care homes, the care home sector. What is the agenda for commissioners or even the CQC, the Care Quality Commission? Are they involved in such conversations that are around, energy consumption and net zero? Because they do have oversight or engagement with a whole community of older people in the care home place.
And from what I have seen, there seems to be a conversation happening around vulnerability, and particularly how achieving net zero will serve the vulnerable communities. But there have been very few attempts to actually bring the three things together, include digital inclusion. And that's particularly actually important because plans of energy suppliers, distribution and transmission companies with achieving net zero are focused around improving productivity and energy efficiencies of systems. And that will come with a proliferation of automation. So automation will reach into people's households. And I think that is going to create additional barriers. Right now, I'm not seeing anyone having the conversation around that nexus of digital inclusion, achieving net zero, and healthy aging. If the conversation's going on and I'm not aware of it, that's going to make me very happy. But if it's not, I would strongly encourage everyone here to get engaged with that subject and try to understand it better.
Who should be the champion, Rali? Who should champion this agenda?
I want to say everyone, but strictly speaking, the problem seems to be that a lot of the organizations that now have the mandate and are required to develop plans around achieving net zero actually don't have direct interaction with aging population, and they would not consider it to be an activity which falls within their mandate. So I would say, I want to say Ofgem, they should take this further, but I imagine there has to be more of a grassroots movement as well.
Thank you.
And thank you to Michael in the chat, who's a resident in Hove, 67, part of the community, and who's a bit frustrated by being a tenant and having a coin-operated electricity meter. Not very smart, open to conversation. Definitely not about having a conversation with your provider either, Michael. And it's one of those kind of cul-de-sacs there. Thank you, Rali. You've sparked conversation already, which is exactly what we wanted. Let's hand over to our second panelist, Suzanne. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great. So I'm Suzanne Noble. I wear many hats, but all of them have to do with helping people and supporting people that are over 50. I turned 60 myself recently, so I've just passed over that threshold. And this is me and my former lodger, Amit, who moved in with me a few years ago after many years of hosting on Airbnb, which I still do as well. And he was looking for a place to live. He'd moved from Canada. He'd been in multiple places. He'd never bought a property here. He was in his 50s and he moved in with me. And my circumstances were similar to many people that I represent in the company that I'm here today to talk to you about, called Nestful. I'm an older homeowner. I've lived in my home for over 20 years. And like many people my own age, although I have my own place, it doesn't mean that I can actually afford to live in it. And that's true of many others that we see in our business. And meanwhile, we have people like Amit, for instance, people that have come over to the UK, or people, students, older people who never got on the housing ladder, or I like to call it the 3Ds: debt, divorce, and death, which created a scenario for them where they somehow found themselves, through financial circumstances mainly, needing an affordable place to live. Many people my own age have cash flow problems, and we know that affordable housing is a massive issue. The housing crisis is well documented. Social housing is very scarce. There's long waiting lists. And then there's the additional issue around loneliness, which affects 1 in 10 older people. And yet there is an abundance of empty rooms globally. And that's where we come in. We connect people like Amit, people seeking affordable accommodation, with people like myself, older homeowners who have got rooms to spare. We like to think that we're reimagining home sharing for an aging society by matching those people together and helping to solve the housing crisis one room at a time. And let's face it, when we look at older people's housing, it's challenging, because as much as there's conversations about co-housing communities and co-living and lots of different ways of sharing and living communally, which we know many people, especially of my generation, are particularly interested in. We know that people over 50, over 60, 80% of whom want to age in place. They want to stay, like myself, in the homes that we know and love, and within the communities that we're comfortable in. Many of us don't want to move into care homes. And so thinking about how we can do that and how we can age in place is a practical solution for me to this whole issue. And home sharing is one way of doing that. And it's one way that we can do that right now. And I'm very much about practical solutions. So when we look at our customers, they tend to fall into 3 specific categories. We've got people who we call the home share newbies. So it could be somebody who was recently widowed. They've got empty space. But they might need some help with actually finding somebody with whom they're compatible and with whom that they're comfortable. They've got issues around not having a large enough pension. We know that this is particularly true for women, older women who have roughly £100,000 less in their pension pot than men through years of bringing up children and not being in the workplace for as long. And then we've got other people who are almost really like what we would term the sort of traditional landlady lodger relationship that we've seen since the 60s in British films. Somebody who's probably been managing 1 or more rooms in their home, really comfortable with having people around, familiar with the scenario, and now is just looking for a solution that's more suitable for them now that they're older. And then we've got people who are really like myself, people who have transitioned or are still doing Airbnb and are now looking for a longer term solution. And those people are really looking for trust, they're looking for security, and they're looking for something that just takes all the hassle away from them. They just want somebody who's going to organize the whole thing for them, help them to find somebody compatible, do all the rental management, and basically become an Airbnb sort of platform for them, but for over a longer term. And we've spent a huge amount of time actually looking at our visual identity and how to make the platform as easy as possible for older people who, let's face it, are more comfortable now with COVID around technology than probably they've ever been, more comfortable getting on Zoom, using technology, using the internet. So we don't see that being a website is a massive barrier to entry, but we do know that we have to keep it really, really easy and simple for them to use. And that's part of our whole UX. What we do is we take them through a fairly standard questionnaire, but then we've nuanced it, knowing what we know, that older people do have their own nuanced behavior. Well, we all do. And so we've created a little lifestyle questionnaire, which is really fun, which basically asks them fun questions like wardrobe or wardrobe, toilet seat up or toilet seat down, lentils or ribeye, and all sorts of kind of fun questions, which gamify the whole process of trying to find somebody for them who is compatible. And the other thing that we do is deliver matches direct to them. So again, we're trying to take away the browsing and the searching that we hear from their experience has been a problem for them in the past, using platforms, for instance, like Spare Room, where they might, for instance, be looking through loads and loads of profiles to try and find somebody suitable and then not being able to. So we deliver the matches direct to them. And based on, at the moment, their location and their budget, and then they can respond back via an anonymized messaging system, which eventually delivers them an ideal match. So that's a little bit of background around the platform. So what we're trying to do is really embrace all the aspects of the journey from start to finish, starting with the matching, moving on to vetting and all the things around trust. And then eventually, it's not part of our current platform, but eventually moving into things like managing the rent, providing them with insurance services, and then the ongoing support that they might need. It's a massive market, and it's very much one that's overlooked, we believe. We've got a few competitors in the States, but if we look at the UK, just in general, there's 6 million homes, homeowners over 50 in the UK with at least 2 empty bedrooms. So that's massive. And there's 1.2 million of those in London. Obviously, one of our key challenges, and one that we get asked all the time, is around how we find those people. And we are looking for partnerships with organizations that can support us in being able to find more homeowners, because at the moment, we have roughly 5 times demand, people looking for rooms to supply. So finding those homeowners is a challenge. And we know that it's not just a challenge for ourselves, but also for our competitors in the States and elsewhere. If you look at the biggest market, obviously that's the US, where there's an estimated 33 million homes with at least 2 empty bedrooms. We do have competition, like all businesses, and we wouldn't be a business if we didn't have competition. Most of our beneficiaries are or have been using Spare Room in the past, but the reason that they've been moving on to us and speaking to us more often is because of the targeted age group that we represent, and also realizing that Spare Room is very much targeted at a younger demographic. Although I have to say that when it comes to our homeowners and the age group that they're looking at in terms of who they want to live with, they're quite age agnostic. They're not specifically seeking same age homemates. They're just looking for people that they like. And that's really what it's about. It's really just about being compatible. So we do get people who are looking to do some reduced rent in terms of helping out around the house, things like that, which is more what's termed kind of traditional home share agreements. And we can embrace that, but we're very flexible in terms of what people are looking for. And then people use Facebook, they use Nextdoor, Gumtree, just more generic services, which require more effort on their part and aren't really suitable for what I would call the newbies, who are a bit more suspect about using platforms where they're not comfortable making it so public that they're looking for somebody to share with. This is a little testimonial.
Hello, my name's Sarah, and this is my husband Rod, and we are homeowners, and we rent out our spare room.
Hi, my name's Sussex, and I'm living in this wonderful place that was found for me by Nestful.
for 20 plus years.
We've been sharing our home with friends and with lodgers for quite a few years, so for us it's quite natural. And most people that everybody that we've lived with becomes friends.
I thought, you know what, I'm pretty confident that there'll be another lockdown, and I don't want to be in central London when it happens.
People find themselves in situations like this as a result of lots of different occurrences. You know, I split up from my partner, you know, after 27 years. I hated leaving my house.
We have always had cats. Cats feature very strongly in our lives, and we didn't have a cat for about a year. And we were looking at getting a new lodger, and we're like, why don't we get a lodger with a cat?
I came to Nestful and they matched me pretty quickly.
My landlady is quite extraordinary. She's 90 years old. She's an artist, which suits me down to the ground. She's
introduced us to things, we've introduced her to things.
She's a fantastic foodie, and I'm a brilliant cook, and I do say so myself.
Me and Ellen can watch things that maybe Rod wouldn't want to watch.
Very true.
And then Rod and Ellen can watch the football, which I don't want to watch.
I seem to have lucked out a bit in terms of I'm getting much more than I thought I was going to get.
We like the idea of using Nestful because it's aimed, people know they're coming to live with older people. But I think probably older people that are interesting.
It's just the most perfect match that anybody could have ever wished for, certainly that I could have ever wished for.
Hello, my name's Sarah.
Oops. So that's a little bit about us, and we're Nestful, and yeah, we're seeking partners and organizations with whom to work. We're planning on doing a pilot either in Brighton or Bristol this summer, and yeah, we're just open to conversations with anyone who's interested in what we're doing.
Well, I live in Bristol, Susanna, so do get in touch after this. So if I can connect you into that community. I really loved the UX, but I also loved how the humour, it felt really refreshing that it was a conversation that you were having. As you say, a lot of those other competitors, it's very functional, isn't it? It's a transaction, whereas this is actually, you know, as you said, the lentils or the T-bone, you know, it's kind of really, really warm, actually, is what came through. And you could tell that from your testimonials as well. How long have you been going?
So we started off as silver sharers in September 19, and then through some investment from Bethnal Green Ventures and some customer research, we rebranded as Nestful, which we launched in February. So it's still relatively new. Oops, sorry about that. That's, nope. And yeah, we relaunched as Nestful in February, and yeah, so it's all quite recent, and we're still working through improving the platform.
But that sounds like that's a conversation you're having with your community, the evolution of the platform.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've just spent the past 2 weeks doing usability testing and talking with people who aren't our customers about what their expectations around what they would want from this and what their own history is as sharers or people looking to share. And one of the things that strikes me about people that are older is they're, as you would expect, what they're seeking and the reason why they're seeking it is so diverse. You know, as a younger person, you may just be looking for an affordable place to live as a transition to moving in with a partner, having a family, and being at that life stage where sharing is kind of expected. But when you get to an older stage, the reasons why you're doing this are incredibly varied, and also the expectation of what you're looking for is incredibly varied. So that's where compatibility and the matching becomes really important, because if you get it wrong, it's a nightmare. But if you get it right, it's, as Ansel said, it's like, it's perfect, and everyone's really happy.
No, I can tell how much you love it as well from the energy. It's amazing the difference you're having. Those videos were lovely, weren't they? But again, it's just having a conversation. I completely agree with Margaret in the chat. It's not for everybody, and you're not saying that on the platform. And I think actually your questions help that. When people really think through the reasons, you said there's lots of different profiles, and you've got to consider it before you bring somebody into your home. And
yeah, I mean, look, it's not it's not for everybody, but in terms of practical solutions to some of the challenges we've got around housing at the moment,
Yep.
both in terms of aging in place and in terms of finding affordable accommodation, for me, it's one solution that can happen right now. And so many things that are being postulated just aren't achievable right now, either because people can't find land to develop the kind of housing that they want to develop for older people in the places where older people want to live, or because they just can't afford to actually move into a place on their own, because housing, especially in urban areas, is just unaffordable for so many people.
It always astounds me, they put a lot of retirement housing in the middle of nowhere, whereas most people I know still want to be able to go to the shop and buy their bread and be a part of a community. And they build these retirement villages on the outskirts, which is, as you say, it's just a complete disconnect. No, I think it's wonderful.
On the other hand, I live down the road from Hampstead, and Pegasus Living is just opening up near me. It's for people over 50, and flats start at 2.4 million.
Wow.
Okay, so I mean, you know,
us mere mortals have got no chance, have we?
No, they don't. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Now, Kahlaid did warn me this has happened. I think Khalid's Wi-Fi has fallen over. So, Lucy, we're going to need to come to you. Sorry to throw you in there. I think Khaled's having having a tech fail, so he'll be back with us shortly. But Lucy, I've just thrown you in the deep end there.
Oh, you have? My God.
So while you're finding this, I'm going to say we've got hello to John in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I love our international attendance. And Ravi is an age tech evangelist, which has got to be the best job title. So we've got some amazing attendees on here as well.
Can everyone see that?
Can indeed.
Perfect. There you go. We are the new kids on the block. We started this last year, literally when the global pandemic started. Well, it was just before, actually. So we had the idea before. So for the last year, put it this way, we've had a lot of thinking time. So the Good Company people, I'll give you a bit of background. Now, very rarely do you get for lunchtime a man in Y-front. So let me explain why I'm putting this up for you. So a little bit about me. In my 20s, I was a television producer, and I was the voice of Big Brother. And so one of my jobs was to be in the diary room and listen to housemates. And one day, John McCurrick came into the diary room and he ranted about being, bereft of Diet Coke for 45 minutes. And that gave me the impetus to go out to Africa. And I went to Uganda to do something I always wanted to do, which was volunteer in a baby orphanage. I had an experience out there, and I was volunteering on and off for 3 years, and thought that the solution was that there were lots of children in orphanages. They were poorly run, so the solution was to build a better orphanage. Luckily, some experts intervened before I went on to build orphanage, and they told me it was the worst idea in the world. So 10 years later, Child's Eye was... I left Child's Eye a couple of years ago with the most incredible Ugandan team working with the government to build the resilience of children, of families, so they can keep their children, so they don't end up in orphanages. So, and I learned there about how, a community can provide a safety net so children don't end up in institutions by supporting families in a time of crisis. So after leaving, handing over Child's Eye, I discovered, my mum has Parkinson's disease dementia, and she was diagnosed with dementia, Parkinson's disease dementia. And I wanted to know what the future held. And so I spoke to many people who were living with people who were living with dementia. And first of all, the conversations that I had with the people who were living with people who were living with dementia were really tough. It just, one of the comments someone said to me is, it's like it's a slow-mo train wreck. It's coming off the rails. It's only going to get worse. And seeing firsthand, my dad and how he's managing it, it's so hard for carers. And I thought that there must be a better way. There must be a better way for people. Then I spoke to a lot of people who were providing care. And the most incredible carers were the ones who, they weren't doing it for the money per se. They were doing it because they absolutely loved their job. But the idea of going it alone and setting up their own business and marketing themselves they just didn't want that hassle. So therefore they ended up working for care agencies, being paid the minimum wage, when I believe that actually, they should be paid a lot more, because caring is such a valuable work to be done. And then finally, I spoke to a lot of people who, were older, and it all struck me that every single person has their own story, and they have their own hobbies and likes and interests. They're all different. They're all unique. So the idea of suddenly putting 40 people together all to do the same thing was kind of like, well, after all of these years of refining exactly who you are, suddenly you're put in a one size fits all, which I just thought sucked. So that's how we came up with Good Company after all of these conversations. So the idea of Good Company is that we want good company on everyone's doorstep. So everyone over 60 enjoys more independent, fulfilling lives for longer. And how it works, it's really simple. Basically, what we're doing is we're looking for hosts, very much like Suzanne. I've had some incredible conversations with Suzanne, and I feel like Suzanne is one step ahead of me. So it's really lovely as a founder, holding on to her for dear life, going, what's going to happen next? But the idea is that we will have up to hosts who we will fully train and vet and assess to support them to run their own businesses, to provide good company. We will take on the problems of unique tax codes and all of those scary things. So all they need to do is provide good company, plus we will provide them with the customers as well, so they never have to market themselves. Then what we're going to be doing is, just like Suzanne, is matching these guests with the hosts, all based on hobbies and interests. So everyone can do what they love together in good company. And I always believe at the very beginning, it's all about, having founded Child's Eye, you really do live or die by your values. And it's really important to get the values right. So everyone who comes into your community really lives and shares the values. And you can always go back to, whenever you're making a decision about what the service looks like, and it's just go back to your values to ask yourself, are we being true to ourselves? So what we value is human connection. We're harnessing the wisdom and experience. So it's very much about this journey as co-creation from the very beginning. Everyone benefits. Everyone wins. I want guests to have affordable good company on their doorstep. I want hosts to be paid well for what they do. And I want guests and I want relatives of guests to have that time off so they can have a job and have that time to be able to spend doing what they want to do, and knowing that their loved one is doing what they love in good company. Also, no one size fits all. So we're all unique. It's all about, everyone has their own experiences, and we never stereotype. Respect and trust. For us to be able to, for anyone to look after my mum, who is the most precious woman in the world to me, apart from my wife, it's about making sure that I respect them and I trust them. So building that, it's the foundations of the work. And finally, we're always curious. I don't believe that this is going to be something that we will come up with a model and that will be it. We will be forever reiterating and co-creating this together. So then you know, the kind of hosts that we're looking for right now. And as I said, we're right at the beginning. Public health is still saying, you know, you can't do this yet. So we've had a lot of thinking time, but we need to find hosts who can champion this. And we're going to be doing this in villages across Wealden to start with. If it works, then we will go hopefully across East Sussex. And then maybe if that works, then next horizon will be the rest of the country. But we really want to get this right first. So we're looking for people who can provide this good company. We'd like that commitment of potentially 3 days a week, because we will be investing a lot in the recruitment and the training and the enrollment, very much about living and breathing the values of good company. We'd like brilliant listeners who are curious, fun, energetic. Oh yes, Mavis is great company. We want Mavis. Guest-centered. So people are like, well, what do you do in good company? You know, and as we've had a lot of time to think about it, our answer is, well, it will be what the guests want. It will be driven by the guests. And it's a pilot. So we want to co-create this together. And then just going to move on. So where are we now? We've not even managed to do this yet. And this is what's, you know, but I always try and see the positive in everything. So we are in a global pandemic, but good company is needed more than ever now. We need to create those connections. We need to bring people, you know, who have been isolated for the last year and anxious. You know, good company is a wonderful transition, a step to get people back into, you know, what will be the new normal. The concept is unknown. So we are, you know, as I said to my team in Uganda, when we were trying to basically persuade everyone that no child should ever be in an orphanage and every single child should be in a family, we were the people who were the innovators. So I told my team every day that we're going to be the ones hitting ourselves against a brick wall, and we need to take all of the painkillers. But once we have made this concept known, then I believe that hopefully it will be adopted by people across the country. But we do need those early adopters. I'm a real film buff, so I don't know if you love Jerry Maguire, but when Dorothy Boyd stood up and said, I'm with you, we need the Dorothy Boyds to stand up here. And, you know, and we need to build a resilient world, a post-COVID world. So just like Suzanne was talking about, we need work to be flexible. We need this kind of work to be valued. We need it to be inclusive. So I believe that actually, you know, where we are, you know, we can make great things happen. So I always think it's quite nice to do a little wish list at the end, because you never know who's on the call and who might know someone. So first of all, we will be prototyping this, and we want a researcher. Of course, we will be looking for funding for that researcher, but we want someone to join our team from the very beginning, because we're learning so much now. And researchers sometimes come on at the end and then you look backwards, but come on, join us on the journey now. Then we're also looking for people who would stand up and become good company hosts, just like Suzanne wanted to find Nestful hosts. We also want you to spread the word. And finally, we're looking for a relationship manager. So if I could be so bold to put the job spec in the chat after this, because we're looking for our first paid employee to help me basically develop this over the next year. So the last thing I just need to tell you is thank you for your time.
Wow, see, that was brilliant. You were so worried about the first round. It was all great.
I know.
And I was going to say, pop that in the chat, but then also pop it in the Possibility Club. So the request for a researcher. Oh, there you go. Dan's already on there. Pop it in the Possibility Club as well to get a wider audience. Obviously, everyone who's come to the previous webinars are on there as well. So let's reach out to the entire network for you.
Brilliant. Oh, amazing.
I can hear the excitement and the frustration of, let's just get this COVID stuff over and done with. Come on.
yeah, but you know, everything happens, so it's timing, and it gives us real time and thinking time, because I think also finally, I think that, you know, especially when you have funders, there is that real sense of just getting it out there now and doing it. But actually building those relationships and building that trust with the ecosystem, which is East Sussex, has just been invaluable. So actually it's allowed us to really build and put ourselves in the ecosystem, which I think all the work that we're doing now will really make things easier in the future.
Oh, absolutely. It's a solid foundation, isn't it? I made the note of changing the narrative while you were talking. You did that with the children. It's like, let's not build more orphanages. Let's stop them needing that. So this is, you're trying to empower the carers. You say, give them some free time, but not by grouping everyone. We've talked a lot about this through these webinars of when you get over 55, whatever old is, you don't suddenly take a pill that makes you the same as everybody else in the same age group. And we need to celebrate individualism and the fact that, there's also another preconception that if you get to a certain age, you stop looking forward, you stop living and wanting additional enrichment. It's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. We're all going to live longer lives than ever before, scary, but we want that to be a good, rich, interesting life, actually surrounded by good people, curious people, having different conversations and keeping learning, because surely that's what kills you. If you stop learning, you stop being passionate about it. So no, well done, Lucy. It's so exciting. We look forward to seeing the rest of your journey. I was going to just ask what the model is for this. How is it funded?
So what we're doing is, I must admit, having set up a charity, I did not want this to rely on donations, because I've discovered that, when it's all down to you to raise the money, oh, you had us. Hello, love that, Kahlaid. When you are providing such services which are life or death, and you don't get the funding, it means that people, you put people's lives at risk. So therefore, we've developed a funding model where we're trying to keep the sessions at a very affordable rate. So it would be under the attendance allowance, so everyone could have a good company session.
Yep.
And we would take a revenue share from the hosts as good company for us providing all the back end support and the psychosocial and the community of hosts. And hopefully after 3 years, according to our financial model, it will be sustainable. However, we have made the decision to we started off as a CIC, but we're converting to a CIO, to a charity. Why? Because I believe that actually what we're doing, is within the objects of the Charity Commission. And if we did have money, we would then be able to give good company sessions to everyone. So if you could not afford it, you would still have good company. So that's the way of doing it. We would have our overheads covered, but any of the donations would mean that we would be able to provide
do more for more people, which is brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
So fingers crossed that financial model works. We just need to get the hosts.
But I agree with you. Any additional pots that might come in should be the icing on the cake, not the cake. Otherwise, you haven't got a long-term business. And I think that's where a lot of charities really struggle, is if you're spending your life continually trying to find those pots. It's also a very stressful way to run a business, which is a charity is a business, a successful one anyway.
I ended up having, I had to be off work for 3 months at the end of my charity because responsibilities for raising $1 million just had me on my knees, and I just don't think it's fair. On not only on people who are raising it, with that pressure, but also on the fact that if you don't do it, you're putting the beneficiaries at risk,
and it distracts your focus from what you started doing this for. Your passion. Look at the love you're getting on the chat. You're doing this because you're passionate and you care, and if suddenly money becomes that all distracting, as you say, you'll lose your heart, and as you say, it'll do what it did to you last time. So we were talking about Be More Pirate, weren't we, before we went live, and that seems you're creating good trouble here, aren't you? You're shaking it up and disrupting it. This good trouble is one of my favorite sentences. It's just looking at how things work and going, why are we doing it that way? Surely there's another idea. And then having the courage of your convictions, which is the step that people don't take. You've gone from being, this is a way we should do it, to actually doing it. So a huge respect for you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah, exactly. Come on.
I'll put my email in. So I'd love to hear from anyone who. Yeah.
And we'll put all the links up on the Possibility Club as well. So we'll make sure we get you some support and some as you say, researcher, your business development, and also host. There's lots of asks, isn't there? So
Yes.
thank you very much. Sorry for throwing you in that. Kahlaid, you're back. Your laptop had a moment on you, didn't it? You did warn me, so thank you for that. Good old technology.
Absolutely. It was a scary moment. And I tried to log back in, but I couldn't see myself on the screen. I'm pleased to be back. And
We're glad to have you back. Thank you. Thank you. So you're now rounding us up for the afternoon.
Thank you so much. What a privileged position to be in, especially following on from Lucy's talk. But I think my talk leads on nicely. I'm Kahlaid Ali. I'm a senior lecturer in geriatrics at the Brighton and Sussex Medical School. I'm a clinician, so I work at the Princess Royal Hospital in Haywards Heath, looking after a unit of older people with several medical problems, as well as a rehabilitation unit for older stroke survivors in the hospital. I do my undergraduate and postgraduate research in aging at the medical school in Brighton. I'm also the aging research lead in Kent, Surrey and Sussex Clinical Research Network. I also have a passion for film. I'm also and humanities. I'm the editor for the Film and Media section, Medical Humanities Journal. So we'll have a longer chat later, Lucy. So, so today I would like to follow on from Lucy's passionate talk, talking about a paradigm shift in aging research. I will focus on a particular research study that my research team and I did in medication-related harm in older people. So I'll start off by stating the obvious that we know that the population in the UK is aging. By 2035, it is projected that there will be around 16 million people over the age of 65 living in the UK. We know that despite improvements in life expectancy, healthy life expectancy, which is the number of years a person is expected to live in good health without disability, has not kept pace. This disparity has been acknowledged by organizations and long-term plans such as the Nhs Long-Term Plan, which acknowledges the significant challenges around funding, staffing, to deliver an equitable service to a growing and aging population. It advocates for a new service model in which patients get more options, better support, and properly joined up care at the right time in the optimal care setting. As has been eloquently illustrated by my co-panelists, the COVID pandemic has exposed significant inequalities in care for older people, such as the care home population. From now on, I will reflect on research done by our group in the subject of medication-related harm in older people to illustrate how we addressed some of these challenges in clinical care, in research endeavors, and how a partnership approach can address some of these problems. I'll tell you a bit about this research first. We conducted a study called the PRIME study, and PRIME stands for Predicting Medication-Related Harm in Older People Post-Hospital Discharge. We know that older people, when they get admitted to hospital, they get several new medications. Their medications are swapped around and changed around, and they're discharged with a whole set of new medicines and instructions and guidance that they find really problematic and troublesome. Medicines can cause side effects. There are drug errors in administering in the transition between hospital and back home or back to a care home setting. We know that non-adherence and people, if some patients do not take their medicines, there is inherent harm in that as well. So what we did was we recruited from a multi-center 5 hospital sites, Brighton, Haywards Heath, St. Thomas's in London, Portsmouth and Worthing. We recruited 1,280 older patients at the point of leaving hospital, and we followed them up for 8 weeks after leaving hospital. What we found out that the incidence of harm is quite high. 1 in 3 adults from the study participants experienced harm within 8 weeks of leaving hospital. More alarmingly, we found out that half of these episodes of medication-related harm were potentially preventable. we had a health economist on the team who estimated the cost of these problems on a national scale to amount up to 400 million to the NHS annually. We also found some significant risk predictors, non-controversial. Older people, the older participants in our study, those who are living alone, and those who are taking a lot of medicines, what we call polypharmacy. And here, the importance of the bigger, the wider context is the socio-economic, the social circumstances, living alone, came out as a significant predictor of harm. So, based on these findings, we developed, along with our statisticians on the team, a risk prediction tool consisting of 8 clinical determinants of variables, which compiled all together give us a numerical score of predicting risk. This risk prediction tool, this formula that we developed, we found it to be better than clinical judgment. We compared the performance of this tool compared to asking doctors at the point of discharge, do you think this particular patient in the study, knowing their medications, knowing their social circumstances, do you think that they will sustain harm in the 8 weeks after leaving hospitals? And we had what we could say a subjective judgment from the doctors. Actually, we found that the performance of this tool is better than the clinical judgment of these doctors. So we had all this information, but parallel to it, we engaged with and reached out with a group of housebound older people and their carers to listen to their perspective as well. We did a qualitative study using focus groups. We did home visits as well as focus groups at the Age UK, Brighton and Hove offices in Brighton. We did focus group. We did individual one-to-one interviews through home visits, semi-structured interviews, and to summarize it, we identified 4 major themes from these conversations with people. The themes were the experience of the healthcare system, the practicalities of these older people using medicines, management issues of medication problems when they arise, and the older person and their carers' beliefs around medicine. So this came as follows. Participants experience incidents of passive listening and paternalistic consultations from their healthcare providers after leaving hospital, whether that a hospital doctor or a hospital pharmacist or the discharge coordinator or a GP, or a community pharmacist. The cohort that study participants told us they acknowledged the conflict between their implicit trust in the healthcare systems and their negative experiences of medication-related problems. Participants felt vulnerable around hospital discharge, describing reduced capacity to comprehend medications instructions, how to take them, when to take them, when they take them, if something goes wrong, who to contact. Pressured discharge circumstances, and you can reflect on the recent COVID experience when lots of people were sent home, possibly prematurely, and they're not ready for home. So that pressured discharge to keep beds empty to get the second, wave of inpatients, and lack of integrated care in community settings. Drug formulations, packaging, and information sheets were not properly tailored to the needs of older people. So this consultation proved to us that delivering a hospital-based risk prediction tool targeting high-risk patients is a reasonable approach, but it will not address the genuine concerns and practical problems experienced in older people and their carers when they leave hospital. We saw clearly the impact of older people understanding of their medicines, what we refer to as health literacy. This is a key component in the intervention. People understanding what they're taking, why they're taking it for, the possibilities of problems, side effects, and what to do. And the effect of the social circumstances and lived experience in agreeing to another medicine thrown at them. We came to believe that unless we genuinely listen to people we want to serve, then our research findings will not and cannot be translated into benefits. hence, I'll just briefly mention 2 studies in the pipeline that we're conducting. The first of which is another consultation exercise engaging with representatives of older people and their carers in a series of virtual interviews to co-develop a specific medicine management plan that is fit for purpose for patients leaving hospital. We want to explore with them from an older person perspective and their carers, what form of support do they want, from whom, and when should it be delivered. These will be the issues that we'll be discussing and exploring with our study participants to develop a patient-centered and carer-centered and social circumstances aware plan. We're planning this study with older people from several community groups, such as the Medicine, Science and Technology platform in the University of the Third Age in Brighton and Hove, the NHS Retirement Fellowship, a platform of reaching out to care home residents from older people, and Age UK. All of these groups, we will be in conversation with primary and secondary care professionals from hospital trusts, from GPs, from the Academy of Health Science Network, from the Applied Research Collaboration in Kent, Surrey and Sussex, as well as commissioners. The second study we are developing at the back of our initial observational exercise, we want to explore how best we can use existing initiatives in hospitals and in the community to support older people with their medicine. There is a program that is rolled nationally called the Transfer of Care Around Medicine, TCAM service. The TCAM service operates between the patient at the point of being discharged from hospital and the hospital pharmacist communicating possible problems relating to these medicines to the community pharmacist, to the GP, and most importantly, sharing that information with the patient and their carers. So we want to build a targeted approach informed by our risk prediction tool to identify high-risk patients, alongside a specific medicine management plan that we co-designed with older people and their carers from the study I just mentioned, to move forward to address a meaningful reduction of medication-related harm in this vulnerable group. Here I must acknowledge support from our partners and funders, the National Institute of Health Research, the British Geriatrics Society, and national bodies which credited our work, such as the Health Services Journal. We've been fortunate recently to have been honored with a National Patient Safety Award in November 2020. Finally, I would like to say, as a clinical academic working across clinical care in hospital and research settings over the last 15 years, I have seen a lot of change, a paradigm shift, perhaps the most important of which is the collaboration and co-creation approach between patients, the public, and healthcare professionals in understanding the problems that face older people, in co-developing and targeting our priorities. A shared decision approach is not only relevant to deciding about medicines, what medicines to take between a GP or a doctor and the patient, but it is also relevant for undertaking research. We all have a part to play: citizens, clinicians, academics, service commissioners, research funders, and policymakers to deliver better health and social care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kahlaid. That's feels like a huge challenge. I mean, and how can technology support this?
Absolutely.
That's my first thought is,
yes.
My mother is disabled, and you come out with lots of different bottles and leaflets, and it's really daunting. And if you're going through a period of illness anyway, you're not potentially in the right mindset, even if you aren't suffering from any dementia or any other sort of conditions. Where do you feel technology can support this going forward?
Absolutely. This is a fantastic question. Thank you so much, Lucy. So the first step is to incorporate what we're hoping to do or planning to do is incorporate the risk prediction tool and the 8 clinical variables into the electronic case records, the patient discharge electronic records that are communicated to patients. It's electronic, but patients can get a paper copy. The GP is aware that this is a high-risk patient. The second part, which is what we're developing, how do we address this? We want to hear from patients what is the best, reflecting on Rali's talk earlier, that digital inclusion can help, sending text reminders to patients, emails, messages, phone calls. If patients haven't got internet or Wi-Fi access, a phone call will do. So that's what we're exploring with people. If we identify somebody as high risk, how often do we want to be proactive in reaching out to them through digital technology, or in the lack of in the absence of digital technology, how can we still reach out? But digital technology has got a lot to offer in identifying those high risk groups in the first place, and then when they leave the hospital, that we still have that connection with them.
And sometimes it's how that data is visually represented, as you say, that the report that's printed out could be quite daunting.
True.
So making it gamification, something you talked about, Suzanne, but almost making it proactive. I'm getting better, because the list of side effects, as you mentioned, sometimes it's basically a dictionary, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is part of the discussion, the conversation with this planned study that we got funded from the British Geriatrics Society, is how patients want to be told about the risk. And actually, in initial conversations, some people do not want to know about the risk. They want to know, to have the reassurance that leaving the hospital and focusing on if this were to happen, what sort of follow-up, what sort of support network is built around that patients with a high risk of sustaining harm. What could we do to support them without telling? There is an element, obviously, of health literacy, which is education and engaging. We see it happening in practice, that a lot of older people take a whole load of medications and they don't know the indications, why they're taking it for, how long they should be taking it for. So there is an imperative and a need for supporting the education and the understanding of people, why they're taking their medicine. So there's health education tailored to the individual, sharing some of the information with the person or their carers so as not to scare them off, because not taking medications, we found from the study that non-adherence, again, comes with its own problems.
Yeah. Well, you want to be empowering patients, don't you? And for the patients to feel in control of their own health. So that's the key message you're giving me, is that we want them to get better or be able to manage whatever their condition may be, but proactively, and also then listen to their bodies, as you say. Because quite often, my father-in-law has just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and you're experimenting with those drugs initially as to what the balance is right for you.
Absolutely.
And it's making it something that you,
It's a shared decision-making process and an informed, so when they're making the decision to take the medicine or to avoid taking the medicine, it's an informed decision. So the two key concepts here is the shared decision-making process, as well as the self-management element. We can, tell and remind and ask people to take their medicines, but if they're not taking control of their own medications, the self-management aspect of it, then harm could still happen. So it is a shared and self-managed process. Self-management is key.
It all links back into aging well. It's all about being proactive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And managing it, and not, we're not going to say that it's probably not scary. It's difficult times, especially if there are multiple medications. That's not a great position to be in, but it's just being empowered to be able to manage that and work through it in the way that they will absorb the data, whether that's color coded, whether it's on an app, whether it's, because we mustn't generalize, as we've said all the way through these. You've got a large group of people who all have their own different ways of learning and experiencing, and the way they want to have that conversation with you will vary.
Absolutely, and they want that risk to be handled. Who do they want the communication to happen with? Their community pharmacists, their GP pharmacists, their GP, or a specialist nurse, for example. We do have community specialist nurses dealing with medications for heart failure patients. That might be the closest person to them that they've developed a rapport with, and they're confident in their support and so forth. So it depends on the context and the preferences and wishes. So it can be a pharmacist, it can be a nurse, it can be a doctor from the hospital, or a GP. So the options are there. So we provide a variety, but tailored to the individual needs and preferences.
Have you seen Susanna's comment in the chat of thinking about fun ways of doing it, rewards for taking your medicine, using Alexa, associated with taking medicine, with music, absolutely. Yeah. Making it not a burden, not a negative, because it could be, there's all sorts of different scenarios this could be required. Yeah. But again, let's mix it up and do something really random with it.
So thank you so much, Suzanne. We should invite you to join our group when we start the study. It's going through ethics at the moment. A couple of weeks ago, or actually last week, I had a virtual ethics committee meeting from a team from Coventry. So we're waiting for the comments. So hopefully we should be starting that study very soon.
No, I'd enjoy that. I have a friend actually who is very anti anything to do with medicine, and she was a homeopath for many years, an aromatherapist, never been involved in traditional medicine at all, and had a health scare quite recently, and now she is fully involved in the health system at the age of 84 in it to a degree that she has never been in her entire life. Incredibly resentful about all of this interference, and also struggling around this whole thing around taking pills, when to take pills, what pills to take. So I really empathize with what you're talking about, because I see it firsthand, and I know that it's for her, everything about this is negative, everything. And even the possibility of not taking medicine and dying is almost more positive for her at the moment, because of her resentment around this interference that she is feeling around her health, that she's been able to manage herself for her entire life,
It's a discussion around risks and benefits. It's a risk-benefit assessment. So the risks of taking the medications versus the risks of not taking the medications, and again, the benefits of taking the medications versus the benefits of avoiding the side effects of medicine. So it's a very nuanced conversation that we need to discuss. And gone are the days when we just dish the medicines, and we do take seriously, obviously, the opinions of people who are apprehensive about their medicine or taking medicines at all, and they've got their own beliefs around medicines and so forth. So it is a very personal, individualized conversation that we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if we look at other health apps, for instance, health apps around slimming, and all my friends are doing Couch to 5K at the moment, and they've all become very involved in this. There are clearly lots of ways now to reward people for good behavior, right? Healthy habits, which do include taking medicine. So the more we can look to technology that's already addressing creating healthy habits and doing it in a fun and engaging way, the more we can, I think, bring that into this ecosystem around taking pills,
Absolutely. And I think that two comments here. Yes, it's engaging and making it fun with and engaging without patronizing, because I think there's a comment from Ilse to the group that avoiding to patronize, because again, what we used to do is a pill count. We ask the patient to come to the clinic and can you show us and we do a pill count. Have you taken them? And they could throw them just before they walk into a clinic. So it defeats the process. Using old-fashioned ways of ensuring, and even the terminology is changing. It used to be called compliance, that are you compliant with your medicines? Now the terms has changed to adherence and non-adherence. So I think the whole ethos, the understanding, the agenda of medicine handling by people and practitioners has changed a lot over the last 10 to 15 years.
And actually, what you mentioned, Suzanne, there is that there used to be dieting apps, and now we've got apps like Noom coming out, which are around psychology.
Yeah.
And it's couched to 5K. It's not get fit, it's achieve. So actually, the way that we're having these conversations about loads of aspects of life have changed quite subtly, but quite largely over the last 5-10 years.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't, there is a big agenda again about deprescribing. We're not, we're mindful of the harm that is there in taking medications as well. So part of the expertise of a geriatrician is to look at the bigger picture and deprescribe in the right context for the right patient.
Yeah. Exactly, it's a conversation. Now, we've unfortunately lost Rali. I think she's had a power cut, so it's not just you, Kahlaid. We're all having our tech fails today. We're doing well, aren't we? Engaging people in their own care is important, because we've been asked, the sort of final question was, are we moving towards self-care? That was a question that came in from Jane. I don't know if we want to go around the group and kind of think about what that means as self-care. Lucy, I'll pull you into this. But yeah, the question from Jane is, are we moving towards a culture of self-care, a system of self-care?
Well, I think it's about, it's all about agency, isn't it? So, having self-care is if you're not caring for yourself, then it's neglect, really, isn't it? And I think people always feel that when you are, looking after yourself, it always feels like, oh, I should be looking after other people. But in fact, you're actually neglecting your own needs. So I believe, very, very strongly that we should be looking at more self-care and looking after ourselves, and then we can actually help more people, rather than us all walking around a little bit broken.
Suzanne, what are your thoughts?
I think generally we're looking more towards preventative rather than prescriptive, and recognizing through things like social prescribing, as an example, that the more we can help people to be happy in whatever that looks like, whether that's, through physical activity or through continuing with work or whatever people want to do. And that's very much what everything that I do is really about, trying to help older people manifest the life that they want to lead in the way that they want to lead it. And I think that the more we can move towards preventative, that is the more healthy we are going to be as we age, which is all about healthy aging. So yeah, I think it's about looking after our own health and our own well-being, and our own happiness, for sure.
As Elisa, I think the key element here regarding empowering people to feel more involved rather than things being done to them. I think, Kahlaid,
absolutely.
I think that's exactly what you were saying, wasn't it, Kahlaid? Is that you want to empower people, so we're not being have drugs forced upon us. It's a conversation, which is a very different dynamic.
Absolutely, and it's an informed. Also, when when an older person decides to take or to refuse taking a medication, it's an informed decision. I just respond to Margaret on the chat. Yes, it's a big problem, and it's a massive problem. The amount of still polypharmacy, the number of medications, and the admissions. We've seen that in our study that 1 in 3 patients. It's an alarming percentage, or an alarming proportion of people who get. And when we defined harm, actually it was harm that requires either a GP consultation, a primary care consultation, or a hospital admission, either an A&E visit and discharge at the same time or the same day, or a hospital admission. We found that the harm that is costly. Going back to self-care, yes, the concept is important, and there are some disease or impairment models where the self-management is important, the self-care is important. For example, the stroke survivors, when they go home, unless they do their exercises and continue their physical activity and social engagement and all the rest of it, unless they take ownership, that won't help. As long as as long as the self-care is not seen as a cost-cutting exercise, because there are some concerns that this agenda of self-care is a way to hide, cost. Yes, we're all limited by resources and there's value for money and all the rest of it. But I think the conversation needs to be different, that the self-care is not a substitute for cost cutting.
Absolutely. All right, we've run out of time. I mean, that's got to be a good sign. As I but Rali, it's a shame to lose you. We would love your final thoughts, but we're going to continue this conversation on the Possibility Club. So if you could all make sure that you're registered on there and that you can get involved and engage. But thank you so much for all the conversation, all the chat. It's absolutely wonderful. There are 2 more of these coming up. 10th of May, 9 o'clock. How do we resist inequalities in the new normal, shaping the future of ageing care and the care workforce? And the 9th of June at midday, how can we turn the problem, in inverted commas, of ageing into the most promising opportunity of the 21st century? We do have to stop seeing ageing as a problem. It's happening to all of us. Let's embrace it. Let's be empowered by it. Let's be in good company, obviously, and meet. Let's do this proactively. We're not going to change that conversation here. So this is part of a wider conversation. There's 2 podcasts on the Possibility Club, 2 previous webinars. There's discussion. We want to hear from you, so please be involved. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our wonderful panel. You've all been amazing, inspiring, and have a good rest of the week, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.